As in all sports and games, sometimes good defense is the best offense. Sometimes that defense takes the form of fouling on purpose. Some people might think of this as dirty pool, but it is simply smart winning strategy. In this video, I cover many different situations where an intentional foul is the best play. The most common type is where you hit the wrong ball on purpose to achieve some benefit, even though your opponent will have ball in hand. Every example in this video is from the game of 8-ball shooting stripes. You should pause the video at the beginning of each example and ask yourself, what would you do in this situation? What would you do here? If you want time to think about it, always hit pause when I ask this question. Since I have no reliable way to get a legal hit on the 11, I decide to tie up the 2 with the 5. This is an intentional foul since I am playing stripes and hit a solid first, so my opponent will have ball in hand. I hit that a little harder than I wanted, but because I had a good line, I still created a cluster for my opponent. My opponent can attempt a breakout shot, but clusters don't always break out the way you want, and the 1 is also a problem, so I like my chances. What would you do in this situation? Again, I don't have a reasonable chance to get a legal hit on the 11. I decide to send the 8 between the 1 and 11 to take away a possible shot on the 1 and leave my hanger blocking the corner. For seeming to have no shot, that is a very good result. What would you do in this situation if you are solids with ball in hand? You can't pocket the 1 from here. My opponent, me wearing a shooting glove, decides to replace the 11 hanger with the 2. That seems to be a very effective shot. However, I can just play another intentional foul by hitting the 1 first to dump the 2 and leave the 1 bad. In a situation like this, a good play for my opponent is to get the 1 out into the open and freeze the cue ball to the 8. I don't have any great options on the 8 from here. What would you do in a situation like this, shooting stripes? Again, hit pause if you want to think about it. A common intentional foul is hitting an opponent ball first to dump an opponent hanger. Here, it lets me gain control of the pocket to create an advantage, even though my opponent will have ball in hand on the next shot. Unfortunately, my opponent is smart, deciding to bank the 3 into the 11 to regain control. He is using the contact point mirror system and the equal distance system to aim the shot accurately. See the links below in the video description or pinned comment if you want more information. That was a good shot for being in a tough situation. Here's another example. Again, what would you do here? If I intentionally foul by dumping the 1, my opponent can't use it to break out the 3-5 cluster. The best my opponent can do from here is separate his cluster and try to leave me with no shot. That was a good shot, but I am still better off than I was before. Now let's look at a common end-game situation where intentional fouls come up a lot. I am shooting stripes, snookered from the 8 behind the 3. The best play here is an intentional foul where I leave the 3 tied up with the 8. My opponent can keep me in the same situation, but they have nothing to gain by continuing to do this. I will just keep the 3 tied up with the 8, eventually trying to get the 8 in front of the corner, where I might get a kick shot for the win. My opponent is allowing me to do this by not preventing me from tying the balls up. I generally expect to pocket the 8 here, but I missed it. Regardless, you don't want to give a player a good chance to win like this. A better play for my opponent is to leave the cue ball under the 3 with separation so I can't tie up the 3 with the 8 again. If I don't get a hit on the 8, my opponent has an easy out. My opponent left me enough room to jump the 8 in, but it is not an easy shot. However, a good jumper will usually get the win in a situation like this. Another option for my opponent is to leave the cue ball above and close to the 3 like this. But if I kick at the 8, chances are I won't sell out. Another option in a situation like this is a masse kick, but this will be a low percentage shot for most people. The kick is probably the best option, especially if you hit the outside of the 8 with slow speed. I've reversed the situation, and now I'm in control. A good way to get under the 3 instead is to use running spin like this. That's nearly perfect, with the cue ball almost frozen to the 3 at a favorable angle, leaving me with no good options. If I don't get a hit on the 8, my opponent has an easy out. The only reasonable option here is a masse kick, but it is not easy. Here are my first few attempts, showing how difficult it is to judge the shot. This attempt was almost perfect, but I didn't get a rail after ball contact, so it is a foul, leaving an easy out. Here's an example that wasn't perfect, but I managed to not leave my opponent with a shot at the 3. The same scenarios also apply when the balls are along a side rail instead, heading toward a side pocket. My opponent hit this one well, but it is dangerous leaving the 8 in front of the side. It gives me a chance to win the game. This is not an easy 3-rail kick, but I was close to pulling it off, and I force my opponent to create the same situation in the other direction. This is something my opponent needs to be very careful to not do. Leaving an easy 1-rail kick like this will not usually end well. A much better play is to send the 8 well past the side pocket. This makes my reply more difficult, and I might sell out the game. Now let's look at an interesting situation where my only remaining stripe is hanging in a pocket but blocked by solids. Here's an excerpt from my What Would You Do Here video that shows how an intentional foul is the only reasonable option. What would you do in this 8-ball situation with ball in hand, shooting stripes or solids? If you are stripes, there aren't really any great options. The best you could hope for is convincing your opponent to agree to a stalemate and re-break a new game, but no smart player would accept such a proposition. Other than that, the best possible scenario for stripes, assuming your opponent doesn't see any good options, is to move the solids and hope to get a look at the 11 at some point. Here, my opponent is not being very smart and tries to hide the 11 again. That gives me a rail first running side spin look at the 11. I failed in the first attempt, but this shot is not that difficult. If I had made it the first time, I would have won the game. Check out the full video linked below if you want to see all options both solids and stripes have in this situation. Some intentional fouls are not allowed and are penalized as unsportsmanlike conduct. Here's an excerpt from my Everything You Need to Know About Fouls video that covers these situations. Now let's look at intentional miscues, which are not allowed and incur an unsportsmanlike conduct penalty, which could result in loss of game. In this example, an intentional miscue can be used to pocket the 8 in the corner, which would not be possible with a legal hit from this angle. An intentional miscue is considered a more severe violation than a normal foul. In tournament play supervised by a referee, it would be ruled as unsportsmanlike conduct, which carries a stiffer penalty like automatic loss of game, or worse, at the discretion of the referee based on your previous behavior. Here is another unsportsmanlike intentional miscue foul because it is not a legal forward stroke. The tip is placed under the front edge of the cue ball and lifted straight up. There is no obvious double hit between the tip and cue ball, but such a shot is not legal because the cue is not sent forward into the cue ball. Here is another illegal intentional miscue used to shoot a disguised safety. Again, an intentional miscue like this is considered unsportsmanlike conduct. If it weren't, this would have been an effective safety because I froze the 8 to the cushion, which would limit my opponent's options. Intentional scoop shots are also not allowed. In this example, if shooting stripes, it is fairly easy to pocket the 8 by jumping over the 5 with a legal jump shot, where you hit down into the cue ball, causing it to bounce off the table. However, it is illegal to scoop under the cue ball like this. If I were instead shooting solids and was attempting to pocket the 5 past the 8 to draw back to break out the cluster, a miscue, which would be unintentional here, would not be a foul, assuming I hit a solid first and drove something to a pocket or a cushion. This shot is not a foul because of the unintentional scoop jump, but it is a foul since I hit the 8 first shooting solids. The final foul I want to look at is a push shot, where you prolong tip contact with the cue ball with a non-natural stroke. Here's an example where the cue ball is frozen to the 11 and I don't have a direct shot. An illegal way to shoot this is to push the cue ball through the 11. I just touch the tip to the cue ball and slowly push the cue ball forward. That is an unsportsmanlike conduct, intentional push shot foul, since there was no stroke into the ball with a single well-defined hit. This is a shot we saw earlier that I pocketed with an illegal intentional miscue. This shot can also be cheated in with a push shot like this. Here, you can clearly see the action of the shot, touching the cue ball with the tip and pushing through. Again, this is a foul. And just as with the intentional miscue, it would be considered unsportsmanlike conduct. Here's a final push shot example, which is again illegal and unsportsmanlike conduct, but it is a fun proposition shot. Challenge somebody to pocket the 13 with a level cue without moving the 8 or hitting a rail, and then show them how easy it is. You just need to touch the tip to the center of the cue ball and push forward and then to your right a little to easily clear the 8. Here is another push shot example from my proposition shots video. I'm going to try to pocket that 1 in the corner. And these are frozen, pointing straight at the rail. You think I can do it?
I'll be impressed.
All right, let's give it a whirl. You even put a little extra flair on there, a little extra kiss.
I see that.
Again, it is unsportsmanlike conduct to play an intentional push shot like this. It is also unsportsmanlike conduct to intentionally use an exaggerated follow-through to pocket the 13 here, which would not be possible with a legal stroke. There were actually 2 fouls on this shot. I exaggerated the follow-through to pocket the 13 with the Q-tip, and I also touched the cue ball with the Q after it rebounded off the cushion. It is unsportsmanlike conduct to use any illegal stroke to play a shot not possible otherwise. Here, pocketing the 8 with a double hit is not just a foul. It is also unsportsmanlike conduct. Here's another example. Hitting on the right side of the cue ball allowed the double hit to redirect the cue ball's motion to pocket the ball. Here is another intentional double hit example. The double hit allowed the cue ball to move forward after the 13 cleared the way for the 9-11 combo. I was a little unlucky with the leave on that shot, but I can use a rail first hit with running spin to pocket the 9. Using the system for aiming with side spin, or SAW, makes it easy since it gives me an accurate line of aim to compensate for cue ball deflection. It also helps to get a little lucky with the help from the side pocket point.
Well, I got lucky on that.
I hope this video helps you be more aware of intentional foul opportunities that can increase your chances for winning games, even when you are in tough situations. Sometimes the best offense is smart defense. See the links below for more information and examples dealing with all topics in this video. And good luck with your game from Dr. Dave.